what's up guys? I'm Parth and I'm in my 4th year of my computer science degree.
This database would be intended to hold NFL player stats for fantasy and gambling purposes. On our website, we'd have a Players tab where you could take a look at all the players in the NFL and then click on individuals and see their individual stats. We'd have a Teams tab to see how a team was doing with those players. And then we have a Matchups tab so you could put those teams up against each other or individual players up against each other. If you want to know if Davante Adams is going to have more than 50 yards this Sunday against the Lions, you take a look at our website. If you want to know if the Browns are going to beat the Steelers this Sunday, you take a look at this website. Our target audience would be any adults that watch football and that are able to gamble on it. Let's say you wanted to delete a player who has retired. You can do that. Let's say we got this guy right here, Davante Adams, and we'd like to delete him. We can do a delete from the database player or the table players where first name equals Davante and last name equals Adams. We can execute that and execute this. No players found now. He's been deleted. Let's say we wanted to know who had the most yards on offense in the league. We would take the first name, last name of the player as full name, take the scrimmage yards as yards from the database players, and now we have to do an inner join with the offensive stats on the player IDs. And then we want to group that by each individual player and then order that by most to least yards. So if we're doing that, we can see Kenny's got the most yards, DeAndre's got the second most at 307, yada yada yada. Let's say we want to know who has the most tackles with only players that have had 5 tackles. We can select again the name from players, and we can select the number of tackles with an inner join from the defensive stats. We join those again on the player ID, and then group those by each individual player and say that each of them has to have greater than 5 tackles. And we want to order again most to least. We run that and we can see Bobby Wagner leads the league with 16 tackles. Let's say we want to know what happened in these games during the dates June 8th through November 20th. We can run a select from the offensive stats. We'll select everything where the game date is between these two dates. And we can run that, and right here we can get a player ID, see how many yards they had, receptions, and all their stats for the games ranging between those two dates.
Hi, I'm Kenneth, and I'm working on the 4th year of my computer science degree. I'm going to briefly discuss our EER diagram and explain the purposes of our tables and some of their data. Starting off at the center of the screen, we have our players table. Each player gets an individual ID, and then their first, last name, their rank number, which shows if they're a top choice player or second string or third string, what have you. And then each player is assigned to a certain team and position. So with our team table, multiple players can be assigned to each team, and the teams just have their team ID and the team name, which is of type varchar. For positions, it's pretty similar. Multiple players can be assigned to a position. Each position gets a position ID, a position name, and then a position matchup, so who they would play against. Then for each player, depending on if they play offense or defense, they'll get their respective stats for each game. So there's offensive stat ID, and the opponent ID will be the team they play against on a certain game day. Then various statistics to show how well they played are shown. So like scrimmage yards, fumbles, touchdowns will all be sent to the certain player ID. Or on the other hand, if it's a defensive player, things like tackles and interceptions or fumbles forced will be shown. Alright, I'm going to start out with a few queries that we've written for our program, and to begin is just a simple select query with an order by clause. So we're just displaying the team ID, player ID, last name, rank number, so like first string, second string, and the position ID, which correlates to the position they play. And we're selecting it from the players table and then ordering it by the team ID, so which team they play on, they'll be grouped together to make it easier for like people to see which team everybody's on. Next up will be an update query, and this query is used to update defensive stats. So say for player 24, you entered the wrong data, so we'll like change it. So say they had 6 tackles and 1 fumble forced instead of 5 and 0. You can quickly update that to show the correct data. Next we have a left outer join query. So here we're using the positions table as well as the players table to display the team ID, the player's name, the position name, the rank number, the position ID, and the position matchup. So here we're just showing displaying the player name as well as the ID to make it easier to recognize like the what the position ID means. So position ID 1 means wide receiver, cornerback is position of ID 2, so it just makes it easier to recognize who's playing which position without having to look up in a different table what the position ID relates to, or just memorizing the position ID to the position name. So next up is just showing a query with a string function. So here we're selecting the player ID and then concatenating the last name and the first name together into one string to make the player name. So this will just make it easier to read out the name, clear up the table a little bit. As you can see, I use the same function on the last query just to clean up the table a little bit so there's less data types, or less data to look at rather. It's easier to recognize the player. And that'll be it.
Hey guys, my name is Kemal. I'm a senior.
Okay, so here we have the insert statements. We have data for teams, positions, players, offense stats, and defense. Here we have a select where query. I want to see tackles, which player had more than 3 tackles, and here we have player IDs and showing which player had how many tackles. We have aggregate function here. I'm also using two different tables in this case, and I wanted to see targets and how many targets each position had. So here we can see each positions, and the count as 1 because there's only one position, and we can see how many targets each position had here. Here is a numeric function. I use ceiling in this case, and I'm looking for scrimmage yard. Scrimmage yards with more than 40, and we can see here the players who had more than 40 scrimmage yards from highest to the lowest. We can also increase this number or decrease to 30.